looks like an iPhone. I think if you click on that. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us on the Celtic State of Mind. Sorry, we were just discussing technicalities here. I'm Paul John Dykes. This is John Paul Mason. And once a week, we get a chin wag on all things Celtic for an hour, and I look forward to it. JP was just telling me about his hectic week. It's good just to take an hour off to talk about Celtic, JP, isn't it?
Well, I'm trying not to think about anything else for this hour other than Celtic, because sometimes your brain doesn't have the capacity to deal with everything that's spinning round in it at one particular time. But yeah, we'll hopefully just focus on one thing.
Yes, the big thing now, and again, because we're in the international break, the realms of that break, JP, is there's no games or performances really to speak of, so we can actually do it now with after the event, with hindsight, right? What went wrong? How has Martin O'Neill, I think, rallied the troops, and where are we in terms of actually getting somebody in place? When does that happen? Who's making the decisions, and who would you like to come to the football club? And I've been thinking a lot about this. We didn't really speak much about it until this week, because it was just game after game, JP, and we're just kind of dealing with that and statements. And now it's all about getting it right down to the shortlist and saying, right, what type of a manager do we need? And I was thinking about it this morning before coming on. And I think this is more to do with what Celtic needs than what the manager provides. Now, that doesn't make sense on the face of it. All I hear in relation to Nancy, for example, is that he's a football philosopher, JP. He's a progressive coach. It's a football utopia. I've heard all this. You can hear that all over the globe. Celtic need to actually go into this and say, right, Knutson, fantastic job he's done at Bodo Glimt. Will he fit at Celtic? Nancy seems to be on the rise over the last 4 years in the MLS. Will he fit what we're doing at Celtic? And I think we need to pick a manager based on the fit. Now, by the way, I think the fit needs to change. The structure needs to change at Celtic, and that this could be part of it. But a lot of people in the comments yesterday when I was talking about Nancy thought it was being disrespectful of the MLS or of the individual. It wasn't. I just don't think he fits with where we are, JP.
Well, obviously it's a concern, isn't it? Like to get to this point, and it was always my fear that if Brendan Rodgers was to leave, this is where we would find ourselves in the thick of it, and trying to find someone that fits our club in the current state that it's in. And we all know the current state that it's in, which isn't really stable. Like, there's a lot of stable aspects about the club, and the beaks will point to the figures in the bank and this, that, and the next thing. But everything that's been pointed out by the Celtic Fans Collective are the things that we are gravely concerned about, and the things that we don't do right. So it's a bit of a cliche to say it, but it almost doesn't matter. Like, you could bring Pep Guardiola into this. Pep Guardiola would struggle in our environment. I think there's no two ways about it, because he doesn't have the framework that should be in place. Whether or not this is the moment where we introduce that framework, I would rather the framework was introduced prior than to a head coach being appointed, so that it's not all coming at the same time. So not everybody's then not trying to find their feet at the exact same time. You want some level of stability for a coach to step into, and whether that is Wilfred Nancy or whoever, it's that would remain my concern. It's not really about what he can or can't do. I do see the sort of the tactic in going for someone like him, because, as other people have said, you know, Ange Postecoglou was untested on these shores before arriving, and has since proved that regardless of what any mischief maker wants to say about his tenure in England, he ended it with a trophy. Might not have been a domestic trophy, but it was a European trophy. And I don't really know, if you put the cold hard facts of his career at Tottenham on the table, that's the one thing that jumps off the page and pretty much sticks the head on you. So I don't understand how anybody could say that that's not a successful reign, basically. And then secondary to that, what was it, a 5th place finish in his first season in a really, really tough league.
Look at the managers that struggled at Spurs before him as well, JP. You know, that was like a poison chalice of a job.
Yeah, But then when you compare Postecoglou to Wilfried Nancy, he's got a good amount of years head start on him in terms of experience and in terms of things won abroad and different continents and all the rest of it. So it's not the same, but the tactic might be the same in terms of trying to, as Quinny says, try to get a guy before he's the guy.
It's a bit like players, isn't it? It's like there's a certain part of that player's career, and we're very good at getting the Matt O'Reilly type just before it's about to blow, and we manage to get them in. And then there's a certain player that we look at whose career might have gone off piste a little bit, bring them in, right back to your Scott Sinclair, for example, in Brendan's first tenure. But even Jota, people forget Jota was like the next golden player coming through the academy at Benfica, and they expected him. There was a buyout clause prior to Celtic doing the loan deal. There was a buyout clause. A lot of Portuguese clubs do this. It was ridiculous. It was like 70 million quid. So Jota was that player whose career hadn't gone the way that they had envisaged, and we were able to bring him into the football club. Probably Carter Vickers as well, JP, a player that's coming through Spurs. They would have expected him to develop within Tottenham Hotspur. It didn't happen, and we were able to bring him in and kind of rebuild a career. It's a wee bit like that in terms of Nancy for me. It's like the sweet spot of that guy's career and taking a chance, because I think it's a high risk appointment if we go for him. The one thing I would say though, it's not based on the league that he's playing in. It's not based on his nationality or ethnicity, believe it or not. Some people were suggesting that yesterday, which is just ridiculous. It's based on the fact that I truly believe, right, that Glasgow is a unique football city, JP, unique in European football, right? And a certain type of mentality is required, not just for players, but for a manager to come into that intensity, right, and survive and actually flourish is a huge ask. Now, in terms of what you've achieved elsewhere, you've got to say, right, okay, but are they able to come into this environment, right? Now, and I think, and I'm not trying to take any heat off the club here, going back to the well, I think the reason that's why we have gone back to the well with Neil Lennon, Brendan Rodgers and Martin O'Neill, because we know that element of it is okay. They can deal with that side of it. A lot of people can't deal with it.
Knows the city.
Knows the city, aye. Aye, I know that became a bit of a aye. But I think that that is, in terms of the Celtic job, a massive consideration. You've got to consider, what environment have you managed in before? Will you be able to adapt to the intensity of this city, which I think is unique in European football?
There's no doubt about that. I mean, it's something that can swallow you up if you're not on the ball from the get-go, and you maybe say one or two wrong things in your first press conference. I say wrong things, maybe just make a misstep or whatever. The press will hang you out to dry for the rest of your time. Russell Martin was a fairly feted coach in terms of his reputation.
Yeah.
And he very, very soon, mostly by their fan base as well, but was eviscerated for his everything. It wasn't just a case of his football, and it was,
big part of that was personal, I felt.
Yeah, aye. I mean, it can actually come down to before someone's even opened their mouth. Mm-hmm. You're picking holes in what they look like and all the rest of it. And I'm not saying that in any way that would be racially motivated in terms of Wilfried Nancy, but it's just a case of like demeanour and attitude and everything else before he's even kicked the ball, before he's even spoken a word. So, I mean, the fact that people were suggesting that was what you were saying is mental. That's wild.
They obviously don't know me as a person, but I find that bizarre. What I would say is the fact that we are interested in a manager in the MLS would say to me that we are scouring the market, JP, rather than, what's close to home, who's in whose phone book. So I'm taking that as a positive, even though I think Josh McCafferty was the first to point this out. There are links between Paul Tisdale and Nancy. There is that link. Now, that's not a bad thing. That's not a bad thing. I mean, I remember everybody tried to take the credit for Ange, right? But at one point, someone was saying to me in relation to the fact that who I mean, I like to know who's the first guy that brings the name Ange Postecoglou into the discussion. And by all accounts, it's Mark Lowell, and he knows about Ange through the City Group. So he's the guy that's brought that name to the table. He's not involved in the and we know it was a Zoom call initially and all this stuff. He's not involved in that side of it. But who's the first guy that comes up with this light bulb moment to say, Ange Postecoglou? But I don't want to compare Ange with Nancy, and I'll explain why. It's going back to a point you made. Ange had 25 years experience as a manager. He had taken Australia to the World Cup, albeit he walked out before the finals. He'd taken them to the finals of the World Cup 2018. He'd won titles in both Australian and Japanese football. So that showed how able he was to adapt as well. And I think a massive part of Ange Postecoglou's success was how he was built in terms of coming into this intensity and being able to deal with it. The intensity not just to the fan base and our demands for success, JP, but also, as you say there, in terms of the media, on you straight off the bat. You remember the interview he gave I think it was in an airport after the Midtjylland game back 2021, and the word catastrophe was used, remember? And he just...
A pretty strong word, mate.
He drew a line. He drew a line at that moment, didn't he?
I remember that is as vivid an interview with any Celtic manager as I'll ever remember, because of the nature of it. The fact that it was so kind of on the hoof, like in an airport lounge, and it was like he was just, there was people walking back and forward behind him, and he's just got a laptop on a table and he's talking to the BBC. Obviously, because of I guess it was because of the times, we were still sort of in COVID, I guess. Well, we were, weren't we? It was 2021. It was maybe not as conventional as it would have been otherwise, but the way that he reacted to the reporter that night, I thought, wow, okay, this guy's got something about him. And I don't think I'd even seen the interview maybe at that point where he'd kind of gone for that guy on Australian TV. You remember the one where he was a young coach? I don't know if I'd seen that at that point, but I thought, right, okay, I'm invested in this guy and kind of want him to do well. And maybe that had a part to play in the initial results that didn't go our way. If you think about Tynecastle, Livingston away, Rangers away, the European exit in the Champions League, if there's anybody that still beats Ange with his stick of, he got knocked out of the Champions League qualifiers, I mean, I do not hold that against him, because he gets battered for his so-called European record at Celtic, and I don't necessarily think that that's fair. I mean, he came up against a club in the Europa Conference League that both Rangers and Celtic would happily have taken that manager away from that club, and that club have since made a semi-final of the Europa League, which his Spurs team beat, and they've gone from being this sort of mocked internet password or whatever they were getting called at the time to, actually, whatever they're doing, there's something going on there. That's not just a wee diddy club, as was referred to Midtjylland as a wee diddy club last week, and you're like, they're not a wee diddy. They're sitting pretty at the top of that Europa League table for a reason. And then you see inglorious Technicolor last Thursday how that is playing out for them. So just that interview in particular did stand out, and I'll always remember that, and I'll always think of that when I think of Ange Postecoglou.
Every so often a team comes to the fore, and because we are so focused on Celtic, JP, it's probably been an ongoing process for some time before we become aware of the success of a team like Bodo Glimt. But you could also put Midtjylland into that category, how they have built, even since the last time we played them under Ange in the qualifier 2021, compared to now 4 years later, and how they as a football club have progressed. And they've done it on a fraction of the turnover of Celtic, on a fraction of the fan base. Talk about global brand. Midtjylland are not a global brand. They're very insular within their own league, yet they've been able to be efficient in all these other aspects of running a football club, JP, that allows them to recruit really well, buy and sell players at a profit. They still haven't spent more than £5 million on a single player, right, in 2025. Their ground holds 12,000, yet they are showing us up. They're sitting at the top of the Europa League. And I always think to myself, Celtic, with the potential that we have, and that was part of a discussion I had earlier on this morning with a certain Jamie O'Hara. You might have watched that. Anybody in the comments, let us know what you think. And I just think if Celtic had even a 5-year plan, and I don't even think that's long enough, JP, but with for me, we don't even have this. A 5-year plan where we look at a club like Michelin and go, right, how on earth did they do that? Right? You look at Bodo Glimt. I think the other season they were looking at the success of Copenhagen. We can look at Club Brugge compared to last season when we played them versus now. And it's progress, isn't it? Whereas I think the biggest frustration for us as Celtic fans is we can't see that at our own club.
Which is the thing that everyone is banging the drum about. It's not about, oh, we are spoiled, entitled, we want this, we want that, stamping our feet. Oh, yeah, all we want to see is progress. And I was thinking about this the other day. If we'd recruited well enough for those qualifiers against Kairat or whoever it would be that we played against them, if we'd recruited well enough and fallen short of that hurdle because they were a far better side, or we'd come up against somebody like Midtjylland again and they'd beaten us, we would still have been tooled up enough to go into the Europa League with a nearly there Champions League squad. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then we would be punching at a decent level in the Europa League. And that's what everyone is so fired up about, because it's clear that we didn't do that. And that's the really, really annoying thing. I mean, the game last week, I mean, the most sobering words I've heard about it came from Alan Morrison, and I only listened to it, I think, last night, and then the next part, the latter part of it this morning. But Alan Morrison and his Yorkshire, Lil, is that right? Am I right in saying that he's
Sheffield? Yeah,
Sheffield, right? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And that
South Yorkshire, I think.
And that accent, right? Just saying. I mean, we're not talking about a massive copier. I mean, Midtjylland's the size of Falkirk, and as someone who has a fairly reasonable knowledge and history with Falkirk, to think that a place in Denmark with a club like that did what they did to us last Thursday, and they absolutely dismantled us. And again, if not to want to put the huddle breakdown too much, but they kind of took apart how bad it was, and basically putting it up against as defeats as bad as the Dortmund game, the Barcelona game, 7-0. Like, it was, in terms of the metrics, the fortunate thing for us was that they called a halt to it after 60 minutes and took off their 3 best players, and then brought on another reasonably good player in each of their places. Again, like you say, none of whom were, a lot of money was spent on them. They're not spending £11 million on players. Like, are we seriously to believe that we spent 11 million on Engels because, it's the Scotland tax or whatever? And it's like, come on, that's just a bad deal. Like, that everybody kind of that has spoken about it has said that, we probably should have spent 7-8 on Engels rather than 11. Mm-hmm. And that 11 has affected his whole Celtic career so far, because he's like weighed down by that price tag, where everybody's expecting him to be, I don't know, prime sort of Xavi or Iniesta or something like that. And it's just like, it's not what we're going to get from him. I mean, we will, I think, eventually sell Engels, and we will make money on him. I don't doubt that. Might not be as much as we would have wanted, but I don't think that paying over the odds for players is something that we should be doing. And I heard that being mentioned on various podcasts in the last week, where it's like, that's not where we should be aiming for. We should be aiming for signing guys 5-6 million, developing them, and then selling them for 12, 15, if we're lucky, 25. You know
the thing with Engels, as he's been brought up, is, you're right, the perception of him when people are talking about his success or otherwise will always be based on this £11 million price tag, JP. That's a fact. Now, I mean, at risky statement,
Adam Ida got hounded out of Scotland pretty much by a significant percent of our fan base because he's never a 9 million striker. Never a 9 million striker. Well, and that's what you read in comments everywhere.
We see it every day. We see it every day on here. This is a thing, you can never speak for anyone other than yourself, but what you can do when we're on live every day, JP, is you can get an idea. You can get a sense of a great number of Celtic fans and how they're feeling. Now, the thing with Adam Ida, then we'll bring him into the equation as well. Like, I'm watching the performances of Trusty, right, and people going about a £6 million player. This is 2025. Of course he's worth £6 million. I mean, we need to get into the real world when it comes to how much it costs to bring footballers in. However, we need to be more efficient at it. So I'm going to use Midtjylland as an example. And I always go back to the time where I was given a presentation about data. Alan Morrison was the man who switched me onto football data and its use and analytics within the game, right? And we used to have Alan on years ago on the audio Acsom, and it was called A Celtic State of Mind. And I found it incredible that he was able to compare, let's say, Chris Ayer to Jason Denayer as a centre-half. And he was able to tell me in terms of duels won, aerial duels, pack, pass it, the whole thing. And he had graphs and all the rest of it. The work he puts into it's incredible, JP. The sophistication of data has gone through the roof, and Celtic have not embraced it. Now, they might tell you, because I'm pretty sure the system or one of the systems that we are using when it comes to data is Y-Scout. You and I could get that. What you need is you need to have a license for what you would call an industry standard system, or you build your own bespoke system. So, for example, obviously, Tony Bloom's Hearts are getting a lot of plaudits this season, JP. What's he known for? Well, he's known for Jamestown Analytics, right? And Jamestown Analytics is a system that you can license, you can buy a license for. Now, Tony Bloom wouldn't sell Celtic the license for that because we're in the same league as Hearts, just as Ipswich used it until they got into the Premiership. But because they were in the same league as Brighton, their license was revoked the minute they got promoted to the Premiership. So in terms of data analytics, that can be used in recruitment, player development and performance, but also analysing your opposition. And we're nowhere near at the point where we should be. And what you've got is all these smaller clubs that we're talking about, smaller insofar as, how do you say a club's big or small? And that's one of the conversations I had with Mr. O'Hara earlier on today. It's not just about the league you play in. You've got to look at your historical context. You've also got to look at the culture of the club, your global fan base, your honours, and how well you are run actually financially as well. How attractive you are to global brands. And Celtic obviously are a big club based on all of the above. The fact that we're playing Scotland is always a stick that people hit you with, right? Midtjylland are not a big club. Absolutely not a big club. Midtjylland are the equivalent to St Johnstone. If you want to look at population of the city, and I know that they are the amalgamation of two towns or cities, and the capacity of their football stadium. They're a Dunfermline or a St Johnstone. I know Alan's talking about Falkirk. That's where they are, JP, right? However, they've tapped into all these little cheat codes, if you like. All right, we can be very, very good at data. Let's make sure we are. How much does that cost? Well, I think Jamestown's license, somebody might be able to correct me, I think it's £1 million a year for a license to Jamestown Analytics, right? Obviously, Hearts aren't paying that because Tony Bloom is a man at the fore. Celtic need to get as good as, if not better than that. And we should have done it a long time ago. Alan Morrison was banging the drum 6 or 7 years ago on Acsom about this. And we're still now talking about us not being ahead of the curve when it comes to data analysis. It's quite incredible, JP.
It almost feels like, so they've developed VAR to, enhance, supposedly or partially enhance the experience for referees and officials to be able to do their job more effectively, to lessen mistakes. Now, we all know that isn't foolproof or bulletproof, and it's not been the cast iron thing, but it's almost like, it feels like that's what has been developed to help officials and referees. And then, like you say, this analytics aspect of football recruitment and football development has been developed either individually, whether it's one person or a person's company or whatever. And it's like Celtic are just kind of going, we don't really need that. We've got this. We've got like the ZX Spectrum version of it, but you have got the...
Mate, it's Pong. Is that the name of the game?
You've got the Commodore Amiga. We've got the ZX Spectrum.
We're using pagers, absolutely.
That's a very, very dated analogy, I admit that. But it does feel like that we're kind of refusing to sort of go with the trend or whatever. And why? None of these clubs should be doing anything better than Celtic. And for a club that have consistently said we're world class in everything we do, every penny gets reinvested. Both of those things are are looking flimsy at best at the moment. If that's to be, and I'm being charitable with that because like that is how I see it. And as I said to you last week, did it take Dermot Desmond to come to a game at Celtic Park to see the state of it and to see the faded, half-torn banners that are hanging off the front, banners missing? That's just the facade of the stadium. What about all the other things that there's a problem with? It was the fan survey, you know. When you drill down into the actual real key details of everything that's wrong at Celtic, does it now take something like this to happen, like a fans collective, to have thousands of people standing outside the front of Celtic Park going, what is going on? What are you doing? Like, this is clearly not working, whatever it is you're doing. We're not standing here with rocket launchers and, you know, what's the other thing, like pitchforks or anything like that. We're just standing here with maybe signage and a megaphone just going, tell us what the hell it is you're doing.
Because so much of it's obvious. So much of it's obvious. And there's so many, I think, quick wins for Celtic, low-hanging fruit, as you might call it, in relation to where we are. I mean, we continually talk about the academy, the stadium, the recruitment, the fan engagement, the football structure. And this is where I've got an issue with some of these great names that I'm seeing linked to Celtic. It doesn't matter, I've got to say, it doesn't matter if Hyen or Knutson were or were not in London. Don't forget, we interviewed Ange over Zoom. It doesn't matter if they are or are not in London being interviewed, JP. It doesn't mean to say they're not in the frame. But I'm going to use Knutson as an example because he's someone who's been spoken about so much on Acsom and through the comments. And again, like you say, we got a glimpse behind the curtain under Ange as to what Bodo Glimts were growing, you know, what they were developing. And instead of saying, and I'm going to go back, cliched as it might sound, I remember Tommy Burns was kind of obsessed with Ajax, the Ajax model, and he was always over in the Netherlands and he was always going through the academy process. And he tried to implement as much of that as he could when he was at the forefront of our academy being developed back in the day. And I think that when you look at that, we've more or less stood still. We've never then said, right, what is our model? Who's the best in class and how can we replicate it? You know, I remember, like, even in my much smaller environment, I have gone and visited massive big channels. I have spoken to the Anfield Rap. I've recorded down at the Stretford Paddock. Channels that have got literally millions of viewers and subscribers worldwide, to say, is there anything there I can implicate, you know, or duplicate rather, and then bring into Acsom and make us better? I think every business has to do that, JP. And I don't think, the big question for me is why we've not done it. And I think the club doesn't like the words arrogant or complacent or lazy, but I'm afraid that's only 3 words for it. I think that's what
they don't like things being pointed out to them as well, and that's why I kind of I didn't. My reaction to when I saw, I know I seem to focus in on these banners, but like when I saw the post from Celtic basically showing you what these banners are going to look like. We've not got them done yet, but this is what they're going to look like, and it was almost like I just kind of, I actually shrugged my shoulders. I shrugged my shoulders to replicate what one of them did, because I was just like, the way that this has been done, it's all wrong. It's all, the optics of it are all wrong. It's not, you asked, we listened, here you go. It's, oh, look what we've been working on. I mean, I'm sorry, but to me, it felt like we'd pointed out the error, and then they just went, right, we'll wait a wee while, and then we'll put it out. You know, we'll get rid of Brendan Rodgers, put loads of the blame on him, and then we'll start feeding out good news stories. Here's the fan survey. Here's the banners. You know, and people will be like, well, what more do you want? They're giving you what you want. And it's like, well, there's so much bigger problems than the banners. The banners are just a kind of a totem of everything that's wrong with Celtic. It's gonna, and I just don't understand why. Maybe is this the ground zero moment where we actually do revamp everything, and this does actually lead to significant change, whether it's at the AGM next Friday that then leads to the new man. Like, are they waiting to just do it all at the same time? That's my question.
Right, I think the answer to that is it should be. This should be the moment. Big shout out to Monty. I wasn't referring to any point you made yesterday, mate. It was someone else, and I brought the point up. They were talking around the angle of my disdain for Nancy was quite alarming. There was a suggestion that it was more to do with things outside of football. Absolute nonsense. I've explained my position on it, just as I did when Ange got the job. I wanted Eddie Howe. I was, all my eggs were in the Eddie Howe basket, JP. And it was at that point that I think you were looking at it going, right, we have gone down one track here. There is no backup. I think we got so lucky with Ange. That's why I don't want to rush into this. But to go back into your point, I had a discussion a couple of weeks ago about big changes at Celtic and when it happened and why. So beyond the world wars and beyond COVID, JP, big changes, 1965, Jock Stein comes in and starts picking the team. That sounds bizarre now, but that was a big change because it was basically chosen by committee. There's a famous story of Celtic going to an away game. One of the historians in the comments will tell me who we were playing. I'm going to say Airdrie. And they passed by someone who was standing at a bus stop wearing a Celtic scarf. And somebody alerted Sir Robert Kelly, then just Bob Kelly, that it was our substitute or reserve goalie. And Kelly was so, enamoured by the fact that this guy was so committed to Celtic that he'd be standing at a bus stop to go and watch the team that he actually played for, that he went back and picked him up, put him in the bus and played him in the starting 11. That's how Celtic were ran back pre-Stein. Stein then comes in, revolutionises Celtic, revolutionises. People talk to me about 1986 being a revolution in Scottish football. Give me strength. 1986 was the year Scottish football got into debt. That was it. The revolution happened with Jock Stein in 1965. Within 2 years, we won the European Cup. When was the next big change? I think, in terms of how we had to react, JP, I think the next big change was 94, where we almost went to the wire financially. Fergus comes in, rebuilds the stadium. And what I'm talking about is where we were. So until Jock Stein arrived, not only were we chasing Rangers, we were chasing Kilmarnock, we were chasing Hearts, we were chasing Hibs. We were not in the top two Scottish football teams, right? When Fergus McCann comes in, we're chasing Rangers, we're trying to stop the 10, right? 2003, we get to a European final, but we need to change because we're going to go to the wire again financially if we continue in that vein, spending that kind of money on wages and transfer. So we bring in Peter Lawwell and a massive change in terms of the structure, our approach to recruitment. When was the next big change? It should have been 2012. In 2012, we should have restructured the entire football club, but we didn't because we were just chasing the 10, right? And I think
exactly
the board,
they should have restructured when they created their new club. They should have done it differently. Instead, they just tried to do the same thing again as they'd done with the club that had just gone down and
try to buy their way out of the leagues, basically. Sandaza and all these, Ian Clark and all these guys.
Kevin Kyle and however many £1,000 a week when he was playing it for away and all that. But like the savvy, and I'm sure there are a few amongst them, will be like, that's what we should have done. If you were to actually,
I think there will be
actually sit them down in an interrogation room with a lamp blasted in their face and sort of I put a lie detector test on them as well, just for additional. But I think they would also agree with that. They would be like, well, yeah, we made a mess of that. We made a mess of our journey back to the top of the Scottish leagues.
You imagine it, because it was something of it. It was the banter years. The journey was the banter years, right? But you imagine having a 10-year plan in 2012 and saying this is what we're going to be doing in the next 10 years. You're still.
There's absolutely no way you're telling me that their 10-year plan was to get into a season during a global pandemic and a combination of fortune and misfortune allowed them to win that league, I would suggest. I wouldn't suggest that it was any part of any sort of grand plan, because they were absolutely throwing money at it as well. The players, buying Ryan Kent for £7 million was lunacy, I think, for them. They'll say, oh, well, it worked out because he contributed to that league title. But what's happened since then? I said at the time, I really hope that we go for 56 before they get anywhere near it, or their fabled 56. And here we are on the precipice, depending on what happens, of course, this season. But it was an absolute blueprint on how not to do the things correctly. But like you said, I mean, are you referring to the person that was like, can't believe you compared Jock Stein to Martin O'Neill? There's no comparison. You were comparing the change in Celtic rather than the individual. I knew exactly what you were saying when you said it.
Yeah, because up until Jock Stein, Celtic had played in Europe. We weren't a European side. We were never going to win a European trophy, right? And I know we got to the Cup Winners' Cup semi-final. We mentioned that on the day that you're talking about. But the next time we were a proper European team was when Martin O'Neill came in, and this is what I was talking about. You know, the actual, the landscape of the football club was so far as we weren't a European team until Martin O'Neill came in 2000 and gradually built us up to a final in 2003. We should have made these big changes. We've referred to the other side in 2012, but we should have made big changes in 2012. We should have created the best football academy, JP. We knew we were winning the league for the foreseeable. We should have produced player after player coming through a conveyor belt. Should have been an academy that the rest of Europe actually looked at and thought, wow, what are they doing at Celtic? Because we had the capacity to do it, we had the money to do it, and we had the time to do it as well. We didn't do it though. We absolutely did not do that. We also didn't have a real recruitment plan. We relied on agents, tip-offs. I mean, how many times did we buy a player because he Dudu Dahan? How many times? I mean, Rami Gershon, we brought him in as a favour. We brought him in as a favour and gave him game time. And
that's fact. That's not you talking out of school or anything like that. That is actual fact. That Neil Wennon has said that from his own mouth. So when he's sitting there on Sky trying to stick up for the people in charge, and then you know for a fact that he's had players foisted upon him that he had no interest in. He actually said that he wanted X player, and then it was like, no, you're getting this guy, Rami Gershon, because he's got a bit of a personal situation and needs to get out of wherever he is. And it's like, all right, okay, cool. I'd never watched that guy before in my life, never seen him kick a ball. But suddenly he's got his name on the back of a Celtic top and he's standing in front of a horde of paparazzi, and you're like, what? This is mental. What a weird situation to be in. And then you've got the Paddy McCourt story as well. And
oh, God. Dear. And there's so many. I mean, I think we managed to trace it right back to Gordon Strachan in terms of interference when it came to the board interfering in signings, or basically just signing players without the manager say so. I mean, we had examples.
See, on that, it's interesting that you mentioned Eddie Howe. Did you see the article Jamie Carragher penned on Sky Sports? Or it might have been lifted from him talking on Sky Sports about Eddie Howe.
Right. No, I didn't see that.
Oh, it's also weird that Ross Wilson's the sporting director. So Ross Wilson recently became the club's third sporting director in 4 years.
Right.
And that's not really a good look for a football club that's trying to supposedly kick on and the investment and everything else. And he said he added the topsy-turvy nature of the club in terms of sporting directors, all the people behind the scenes, almost feels at times like he's there on his own. The big Saudi investment hasn't really kicked on. Now, they could question the PSR, the rules, I get all that, but something to me, when I look at how he had to handle the summer with the Isaac situation, getting players in late like Johan Wissa, it's been a mess at Newcastle, really. And when you're talking about one of the greatest managers they've ever had in their history, I think he deserves better. And if I'm thinking how Eddie Howe's thinking, if that England job came up in the summer after the World Cup with Tuchel's contract situation, I'd be there in a shot. So he's kind of like almost sort of painting a picture of an Eddie Howe at Newcastle that's been let down by the club in terms of recruitment, having been forced to sell his top striker. Now, admittedly, that was because the striker wanted to leave, but that was still handled badly by Newcastle. You can't deny that in terms of, no, you're staying. No, you're staying. What have we done with Dyson Maeda?
Yeah, I know.
And now there's chat of Dyson Maeda going in January. To lose Dyson Maeda in January in this season of all seasons would be horrific. It would have been horrific in the summer, but not so bad if we'd actually had a striker lined up to replace him. But where is your faith in having anybody lined up to replace Dyson Maeda in January? I've got none.
But this is the problem I've got in terms of recruitment, because it's not just recruitment of footballers we're now worried about. It's recruitment of a manager and a management team. And this is where I've got some real concerns. I'm going to give you, because we spoke quite a bit yesterday, and I think most of the focus has probably been on Wilfred Nancy, right? We're going to speak a little bit about Kieran McKenna, and I'm going to bring in some comments. But before I do that, and I've already shared this with you on, I think, because this is funny. This is a player who has worked with Kieran McKenna, and he says, right, this was what he said about McKenna, because I'm looking at McKenna. I'm going to tell you why I think he's a good candidate. Here's a quote. He uses statistics as a drunken man uses lampposts for support rather than illumination. So that is the take of someone who knows how Kieran McKenna works. McKenna is very much data-driven, right, in relation to not only player recruitment, but also the development, the performance of his own players, and also the opposition, right? So you're preparing for games that way as well. I think that if we are going to bring in a new manager in the next few weeks, we also need to make absolute, without a doubt, right, we've got to make promises to that manager that there will be a structure that fits the way that person manages. So, for example, if you look at Kieran McKenna, I'm going to tell you my take on this, because people say, but he had a terrible record and he got relegated at the Premiership, etc., etc. I think he took Ipswich as far as he could take them. I mean, how far do you take Ipswich Town Football Club? No disrespect. I mean, the golden era under Bobby Robson and all that. At Ipswich Town, there's only so far they can go in the Premier League, JP, right? Absolutely. And as I said before, and it wasn't the reason they got there, but a massive tool that they were using was Jamestown, Tony Bloom. And as soon as they get into the Premiership in England, because Brighton are there, and Tony Bloom's also got a stake in Brighton, they can no longer have their license. It's revoked, right? So that data model...
Computer says no.
Computer says no, absolutely. So that data model that had been massively pivotal in the success of McKenna getting into the Premier League was no longer there. You look at the change in the way that they started buying players, for example, because you've got to obviously up the tempo once you get into the Premiership, JP. You hadn't spent a lot of money until they got there, and then it's hundreds of millions, isn't it? And so I think there was a culture shock. McKenna's team then dropped a division, and obviously they're trying to build themselves back into the top bit, into the playoff places of the Championship. So I think he took them as far as he could go. I wouldn't allow that to skew the narrative on what is an emerging talent when you look at his background. So he's a player who retired before he made a senior appearance through injury. And obviously from that point went right into it, basically become obsessed by coaching. And not just that, but development of players. So he's working with Spurs. He's working with Manchester United, right? A lot of that is data-driven back then as well, JP. And when he's at Man United, who's he working with? Jose Mourinho, assistant manager, by the way. Jose Mourinho, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, Ralph Rangnick. Remember him? He was the golden boy, director of football.
It's Man United. Remember, I've got an intimate knowledge of their managerial casualties in the last 12 years since Sir Alex Ferguson left. So there's been a few, but he's working and learning under some top coaches. People might scoff at Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. Have a look at his record at Man United. Have a look at what he did. If you were to say, JP, I'm not a Man U fan, but since Fergie left the football club, who's been their best manager? Is he in the discussion? Mourinho's in the discussion as well, purely for the fact that he won silverware. May not have been the one that we wanted, but I mean, he did win silverware. And I don't think Mourinho goes to Old Trafford and gets booed or anything like that. I think he would probably be applauded for those wins. But yeah, I mean, the fact that you were talking about this yesterday, the fact that Kieran McKenna's on a reported between 5 and 6 million a year, is that actual fact? Because nobody's earning that sort of money a year unless they've earned it. You know, he's not started out at Ipswich on 5-6 million a year. And
is he making it since he dropped out the Premiership? I would also ask that, because clubs always have something written into the contracts, don't they, with regards to your salary.
Yeah, but how long has he been there at Ipswich?
4 years.
4 years, right? So he's probably started at Ipswich on, I don't know, let's say 2.5 or something like that, and maybe his ceiling when he was in the Premier League was 5 or close to. I don't know if it was if bonuses were included in that or not. Who knows where someone's plucked that figure from? But what I'm saying is that you don't get to that level of earnings unless you've done something to justify it.
Yeah.
Do you know, that's how I would look at it in terms of us going for him. I know.
By the way, our salary's not bad. I mean, let's be honest. £3 million a year is a decent salary for a manager, right? And
but
McKenna,
what if we upped it?
Well, it could well be part of this anger management that Dermot Desmond's going through at the moment. Apparently, when he's angry, he opens the purse.
What did we go to from Ronnie Dyler to Brendan Rodgers in 2016?
It's a very good question, because I remember when Neil Lennon, going back a few seasons, Neil Lennon got the job first time round. His salary was 300 grand. 300 grand. Now, if you consider when Dalglish, Barnes and McDermott and Black were the management team at Celtic in 1999, the entire budget for the management team was £1 million. £1 million back then, right? Mm. And by the time Neil Lennon takes over, 300 grand. That's how much he was on first time round. Now, I don't know how that increased, but if you're bringing over Ronnie Dyler from Norway at that point, what is his salary? I would just be speculating, JP, but I don't think it would be more than £1.5 million. I don't think it would be more than that. Now, when Neil Lennon,
giving him a platform to prove what he can do on a far bigger stage with a club who boasts that they're in European competition 19 out of 20 seasons or whatever, and it's there's a hell of a lot more pressure and expectation on somebody at Celtic than there is at, no disrespect to, was it Storm Broadset he was at before?
Yes, yeah.
So. I just would look at that in terms of, I don't know if it would necessarily, everything has gone up in price in the last few years.
Yeah.
Managers' salaries will be no different. So if Brendan Rodgers was on 3 and Kieran McKenna is a target and is being spoken to, I don't think that it's beyond the realms of possibility that he could be offered 3.5, 4.
Can I tell you, if Dermot Desmond wants him, he'll get paid.
Oh, yeah, but that's the thing. There's obviously Mark Guidi said Dermot Desmond's taking a back seat to this managerial appointment. He won't be at a back seat when it comes to the signing of it. He won't be at a back seat when it comes to finishing the conversations that have been started. If he's not been involved in them in the initial period, he'll be there at the end. And I don't doubt that at all. Welsh people have reservations about the guy, myself included, especially after that statement, which was completely unprofessional and an unnecessary footnote to a manager that has given us success consistently over these 2 spells. Even the harshest critic of Brendan Rodgers cannot say with any straight face that they didn't celebrate any of the league titles that he won, or didn't celebrate the fact that we won an invincible treble. You need to park your dislike of the guy to actually acknowledge what he did for our club. And many people will be like, oh well, he didn't have any competition. It's like, well, you can only urinate with the appendage you've been given, and he did what he did with Celtic at that time, and I did it again. Won as a hugely important league that first season he came back 2 years ago. I'll bang that drum forever. But yeah, the Dermot Desmond thing, if he does let everybody else do the groundwork and then comes in at the end to sort of not take the glory, but to sign it off, and it's a case of, well, they've got to run out the room from the meeting with Kieran McKenna to phone Dermot Desmond to be like, look, he's asked for 3.75 million a year. Is that okay? And then Dermot Desmond will sanction that, or he won't sanction it.
Is it a WhatsApp group? Does Desmond just send a moustache emoji? Is that what happens? And that's a yes, go for it. I don't know. I'd like to see it. So get some of these comments in. Brilliant that you're all getting involved. We've got some Acsomers in here. Let's have a look for them. Know that they're getting priority, by the way, over Jungle Lion. But Quincy, newly named, is in. He's looking very thoughtful, because I think we were saying yesterday, did a brilliant piece on Seltzer here. Going to have a look at it, deep dive into the pros and cons of bringing Nancy to the football club. Double Denham's also in there, not opposed to any candidate. I think if someone is showing a degree of promise, even at an early stage of their career, then they shouldn't be automatically dismissed, and they need the right structure. Chris, we will talk about this next week. I disagree slightly. I don't think we are in a position at the moment to go for high risk. right? And I see that as high risk. I think that in terms of us, and this big change that I'm talking about in 2025, JP, being the latest massive change. And by the way, I want to go through that process whilst winning. I don't believe that the only way that you change is by becoming unsuccessful. I think you can do both. I reckon that you bring in a manager and you've got at least a 5-year plan in relation to how you're going to approach this. Therefore, the manager and the structure have to align. And if they don't align, then we're not going anywhere. We're just basically chucking money at a situation again, JP.
I mean, to have any sort of plan put in front of us, it doesn't have to be completely thorough and bullet pointed and everything else, but to have a plan that within that plan there is obvious takeaways from that plan that you could lead yourself to your own conclusions over what the club wants to do. Obviously, Japan with their 100-year World Cup plan.
Incredible.
It's
30 years into it.
It's quite apparent from that their goal is to win the World Cup. It's not about, well, we want to do this and we want to do that. We want to do this in a competition, or we want to develop this part of the nation's team or anything like that. It's just like, right, that's what our end goal is to win the World Cup, and nothing else really kind of matters apart from that. Whereas if Celtic were to present to us at the AGM, before the AGM, the day after the AGM, who cares, a plan that highlighted where we were tracking towards in European football, domestic football, whatever you want to call it, youth development, all of that. If they were to present that to us, it would just be a huge sea change in attitude, and I think people would kind of go, okay, right. They're not going to say, you asked, we listened, or you told us, we listened. But ultimately, this is kind of what we want to see. And that's you don't just do that mid-season. It's got to be something that's not knee-jerk. Like, I don't know what I'm trying to say, but I don't want it to just be a reactive thing that is like, oh, look, we've got all these people outside the front door and they're not happy. Like, and I heard someone say, oh, well, if they appoint like a top manager, then we'll all just sit down again. It's not just about that. It's never been just about that. It's just the same way as it's not just about winning a treble or whatever. It's more than that. You want to see development across the board and improvement across the board.
Yeah.
And see the money that you're putting in reinvested in the club, as they so boldly say that they do all the time, you know. And I don't invest as much money as people who have the fancy seats and everything else and pay $3,000 a year for a season ticket or whatever it is. I pay close to £800, but even that £800, I don't see, you know, being reinvested in the way that I would like it to be done.
No, because I think the big issue here is going back to your point you made. We don't reinvest every penny, as has been recently suggested, because we're sitting with £77+ million in the bank. And yes, there are running costs of a football club, but a club like Celtic don't need to have that size of a buffer. Therefore, we've underinvested in the team, we've underinvested in the stadium. That's what we've done. And we need to absolutely have a plan on this. Kevin Graham's also in the chat. Are we a bigger club than Bodo? Asking for Seamus. Yeah, we are. We absolutely are. But the thing that I would take from that is that Bodo Glimt, Midtjylland and others are absolutely more efficient than we are when it comes to growing and progressing. Evening, everybody on Acsom. I wonder where you're watching from, Ali. 6666. Where are you watching from where it's the evening? Let us know in the comments section. And we've got Liam Devine in here as well. The first and foremost is we need a top coach. Nancy is that. You don't need 20 years to prove that. Next is the character. That's very hard for us to assess. I think it is, and it is so important because you cannot. I think Ronnie Della had a culture shock when he came to Celtic. We interviewed him after he left the football club. We interviewed Ronnie when he went back to Norway for a few years. And with the audio interview, it's on the YouTube channel, and he did speak about that. He thought he knew what the job entailed, but he came here and he was blown away. The pressure, the intensity of it was just far too much, and it is for a lot of people. JP,
it's a lot for a lot of players as well.
Yeah, without a doubt, regardless of their quality. And I think we've seen that on both sides of Glasgow over the years. Top quality coaches coming in absolutely drowning.
Le Guin.
Le Guin's become a meme. Le Guin was one of the most up-and-coming managers in European football when Rangers got him, seriously. And he failed. He absolutely failed.
I don't necessarily think Philippe Clement's that bad a manager.
I don't think so. I don't think Van Bronckhorst is either.
No.
I think it's bizarre when you look at what he's done.
They were eaten up and spat out of Scottish football very, very quickly. And to use another food analogy, I just when you were talking about the Bodo Celtic comparison, we might be a bigger steak, but there's a lot of fat on our steak. Bodo Glimt, a fillet steak,
prime,
and, and same with Midtjylland as well. No fat, smaller maybe, of course, in size, but not as much fat.
By the way, that's a great analogy.
Don't know where that came from.
The best yet. It's the best, and it came to you when you were looking at me talking about excess fat. So thank you for that, Derek.
I think it's because I'm hungry. I'm hungry. That's probably it. I've not had any. I had a banana before I came on here. So
pre-match, I had a lively discussion with Jamie O'Hara before I came. McKenna isn't coming to Celtic. His buyout is $5 million. Yeah, I've heard that figure as well. So the buyout is $5 million. You know what? Pay it. If he's the right man, pay it.
We paid $11 million for a player. So
yeah,
we have paid $11 million. That's 2 seasons of Kieran McKenna. I'd rather we went and spent $11 million on 2 seasons of Kieran McKenna than try and go out and beat our transfer record at this point.
CEOs just pulled in $1 million.
Yeah.
So yeah, pay it.
I saw they had a back, not sponsor, just a hashtag.
Did you notice that? Yeah. So thankfully, they used it for the foundation. And whilst it's been blank all season, they probably could have been using it for the foundation. But that's worth £1 million a year to Celtic. £1 million. We could have a data analysis system for that. Go out and get your shirt sponsor and let's buy a data system, right? And he's earning more than Rodgers was. Yeah, he is because of where he is. But that drop down in terms of dropping out of the Premiership, every football club needs to have that tiered system of wages. And it all depends on what's. So I'm not sure if it still is on more than Rodgers because there's different reports online. Board won't pay that for a player, let alone a manager. Maybe they will. Lupe,
Celtic paid $5 million twice for Balikwisha and Tinekti.
Oh man!
I mean,
can we not swap him for Balikwisha?
Tinekti, I'm not willing to give up on that guy. I'm not going to die in a hill about it. But I don't know. But Tinekti's apparently injured now as well.
I saw that pulled out the Tunisia squad. Unfortunate if true.
I wasn't at the game on Sunday. It was the first game at Celtic Park I've missed this season. It was quite a harrowing experience having to try and listen to it on the radio. I mean, it wasn't even on the radio because it was a 4 o'clock kickoff. You still had the 3 o'clock kickoff games, so you could only get the second half. So it was hugely frustrating. But even more so to find out that Sirachi had walked off injured.
And when you look at the way it's happened, and the nature of these injuries, JP, there is an underlying issue when so many players are pulling hamstrings. That's something we need to look at as a football club when it comes to conditioning. Lupe says Celtic need a manager who can build out. In this day and age, you can't even listen to the game. That's incredible, isn't it? Who can build houses with chewing gum and toothpicks, can work without hot water or hot showers, and can thrive in a Glasgow fishbowl. Yeah, you're not far away, but I do think this is the point where we need to change all that. This is the point where we need to cut all the flab off that prime steak, JP, and make sure that we're as efficient and as lean as we possibly can be. And see if you are, and you still don't get into the Champions League, but you're doing everything you possibly can do.
100%. And I don't think anybody that was standing outside Celtic Park before the game 2 weeks ago would disagree with that. They would be like, right, okay, we're kicking the ball. We're not just waiting for it to get pumped up. We're actually doing something about what needs to be done, and that's not good enough. Fine. Okay, we're not there yet, but we're not even doing the bare minimum, and that's what frustrates everybody.
No, this is a problem. And when you look at that role of dishonour, going right back to Maribor, and you think, what could we have done better? Every single one of those, we could have been better prepared. See, when you actually look at how we went into these games, JP, I mean, I remember the Cluj example whereby Cluj knock us out of the qualifiers. We later meet them in the Europa League group stage, and by the time they beat us away, it's a dead rubber. You'll remember we ended up playing Scott Robertson, if you remember him, Karamoka Dembele over in Romania. We played a shadow side. We beat them comfortably at home, because by the time we met them in the Europa League, we had the players who had come in had bedded into the team. On the night at Celtic Park against Cluj, we had £10 million worth of players on the bench, Julien and Bolingoli, when we didn't know how good, bad or indifferent Bolingoli was. And we played Callum McGregor at left back, even though we'd spent over £3 million on a left back. So I think as football fans, we're realistic. And if we had got everything prepared and we were beaten by a better team, then you know what? You take it on the chin. I can accept defeat. But when it's because we're not well enough prepared, JP, it's harder to take, isn't it?
Well, it's why nobody was, there was a lot of kind of online discourse about, the Martin O'Neill bubble was burst after Midtjylland last Thursday. And you're like, I mean, the guy's good, but he's not that good. he can't, no disrespect to Anthony Ralston, but he can't turn Ralston into Cafu overnight. He had already said quite wisely in the build-up to that game, I was at the City ground and I watched them beat Nottingham Forest, who are a Premier League team, and with a bit to spare. I think it was 3-2. It was the scoreline, but I think it could have been more if they'd wanted it, much similar to the game last Thursday. So I wasn't suddenly, decrying Martin O'Neill's tenure because of that game. And I was thinking, I said to you last Thursday, a draw would be an amazing result tonight if we could get it.
Yeah.
And it proved that that was beyond us. But I think what he has proved in the time that he's been in charge is that he can get a tune out of the team, and even just that kind of freshening up of the side. I mean, putting Simpson Pusey in at right back was a left field, what the hell's going on here type move. But it was a case of he must have just, him and Maloney, or Maloney himself might have just said, look, we need to get you out there and get you playing and just like shake off this where is he tag, and can you give us 60 minutes at right back? And he'll have went, yeah, all right, I mean, well, let's do it. So just getting them out there, and I guess it does bring a freshness to the team in terms of like Tenecti coming in, like Tierney saying he's a pleasure to play with and things like that. You look at Osmond as well and what he did in that short spell. I'm absolutely gutted for him as well.
I know.
So brutal. I mean, we were talking about him last Thursday in going terms and what he did in the semi-final, how it was the best day of his life and everything else. And then he shows you the ups and downs of football. He goes from like the ultimate high to coming off a pitch, bereft. And fair play to the Midtjylland manager for going over and sort of having a word and stuff like that. That's pretty cool to see that.
But class. It's just class, isn't it?
No, it was, but also just so rotten for the guy, because just as you've got that kind of bit between your teeth and you're like, right, I'm in, I can do something here now. I've proved myself. I've scored against Rangers. That means I know I can score against, Kilmarnock on Sunday or whatever. And he might have even started on Sunday if he'd not. It might have got his first start. I mean, if you're starting Simpson Pusey out of absolute nowhere, then you'd probably think that Osmond might have started on Sunday as well. So the hope, we've not even spoken about the Martin O'Neill conundrum and where that goes from here. I firmly believe that he'll still be the manager a week on Saturday. I don't think that's changing. Obviously can easily be proved wrong in a matter of minutes after this finishes, but I just think that he will be. And I got a feeling that whole December thing that came out about Celtic are waiting to December for reasons that we don't know for sure, but possibly because of who's going to be available in December, or just purely for the fact that whoever they've been speaking to have said, well, I'm not going to come in November. I'll come in December. But then transfer window, January's fast approaching.
You're buying players for the manager in January, and those players are already scouted by a scouting department that has no head of scouting now, because he left yesterday for Swansea. So basically Paul Tisdale and the scouting team are assembling the players for the new manager, if that's the case. And that's another concern entirely. If we can't get the right candidate right now, don't make the change right now. Now, we talk about legacies and everything else. Martin O'Neill's legacy, right, it's not going to be tarnished. It's not. I know Chris Sutton said that, he's concerned about his legacy. Martin O'Neill's legacy is not going to be tarnished. Celtic fans know what he's walked into here, JP, right? So however long it takes for us to find the right candidate, stick with what we've got there now. They've steadied the ship. He was out there scouting St Mirren with Fozzie last week. He's done his legwork. He's probably having a well-deserved break right now.
Oh, God almighty. I mean, if it's been intense for us watching, what in the hell has it been like to be? I mean, I brought this up with you a week or two ago when we were talking about it, and just the fact that the travel aspect, and I mean,
huge.
Yogi referred to it yesterday as well. Obviously, having had elderly parents, he'll have seen his dad being put through that for visits to wherever, or it's not like Lisbon Lions sat with their feet up after they retired. I mean, once they were kind of more brought back into the fold by Fergus McCann. Am I right in saying that?
Martin
O'Neill, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
I knew it was somebody that
remember the single we released, and Martin does a narration as part of the intro, and he talks about the Lisbon Lions. Oh, phenomenal. Yeah. So it was him. He organised a meal. He got all the boys back in for a meal.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but from that moment on, they were, visits to grounds and, anniversaries, all the rest of it. So traveling at that age, I mean, it will have taken it out of him.
Big time.
And then the whole darkened room thing, I'm not surprised to hear him say that that's what he was going to do for this week. Just take some time, just sort of allow his, equilibrium to sort of take shape, and just sort of realise that he's actually the Celtic manager right now, which is probably not something that definitely not something that he ever thought he was going to do again. I mean, I think he'd resigned himself to doing what he was doing and was pretty happy to do that, and never expecting that to happen again. And yet here we are, and he saw us through a potentially difficult period where we could have dropped points against Falkirk, we could have dropped points against Kilmarnock, and then wouldn't have been able to put the necessary pressure on a Hearts team that obviously stumbled at the weekend, stumbled prior to that, arguably probably without the aid of VAR should have probably lost at St Mirren.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
And that I still don't subscribe to the well thought of feeling or notion that Hearts are definitely going to fall away. We've sat and spoke here about analytics for quite a lot of the show. It would be absolutely wild to just be like, well, we've spoken about how great analytics are and how they work and everything else, to then suggest that they're not going to work again in January when they need it. So if they're using this whatever whirligig that they've got to figure out what's wrong at Hearts right now, they'll be like, oh, well, we need to improve this position, and he needs to be improved, and everybody's replaceable. They'll be like, well, he's not performing. We've got all the stats for what he's not doing, or so we'll just take him out, put somebody else in, and they can do that in January. As soon as the clock ticks into 2026, that's exactly what they'll be doing, and we currently don't have anybody as head of scouting to even do that. So,
and without the hidden power that data analytics provides in relation to that, Hearts will have already up their sleeve 2 or 3 signings for January. We don't even have a manager. So you're absolutely right. That's the balance that we're at the moment. But, Martin O'Neill has reduced the deficit at the top of the table. He's got us into a cup final. I don't see there being any rush. If it takes an extra 4 to 6 weeks to bring that manager in, I'm okay with that, even with the January challenge of bringing players in.
Yeah, that's an unfortunate sideshow to the whole thing, which obviously is a massive sideshow because it obviously impacts next season as well. However, the circumstances that have been presented to us are that we kind of do need to live week to week right now, rather than look longer term in terms of just like preserving what is happening right now, because you've got a slightly resurgent Rangers coming up behind you as well. So you still need to concentrate on the here and now, which is the football team, as Martin O'Neill has pointed out. And the questioning that he's been getting from journalists and everything else is beggars belief. The sort of excruciating lengths that they're going to like try and get answers out of him, and he's like, look, I'm here to manage this football team. I've got no idea what's going on above. I'm not privy to any of that. You know,
that would need to change. That would need to change. See if we go into the next run of games, I would say Martin O'Neill does the pre-match press conference, which is held at Celtic Park or Lennoxtown. He does that. See, everything else that needs shared out. So send up Fozzie, send up, if you want subtitles, send up McManus, send the guys up to do the talking, and leave and take some of that onus and that pressure off of Martin O'Neill.
I agree, because from people like it was Connie McLaughlin, I think it was after.
Oh, did you see that?
It was at the Michelin game.
It was afterwards, yeah.
It was just
went absolutely, yeah. I'm not happy with that answer. Answer it again.
It was like something in our ear going, ask him again.
I know.
And you're like, what do you think you're going to get different out of this guy? He's not going to suddenly just be like, here's the box of secrets. I'm going to tell you everything, you know?
It was an aggressive interview.
I felt it was unnecessarily aggressive. Really, really did. And for someone like Martin O'Neill, you're like, does he really deserve that? Surely, you must know that he's not going to spill beans about anything to do with,
or get rattled. Get rattled, you know.
Yeah. I did actually feel like it was a continued. It felt like it was even harder than they'd gone on Brendan Rodgers. Rodgers,
I agree.
I think Brendan Rodgers got a slightly easier time of it in terms of that aspect of it, because it wasn't quite as aggressive.
No, I can't remember them being as aggressive as that with the likes of Steven Gerrard and all that either. So I think that tells its own story. Thanks everybody for getting involved. I've got to bring this up here in the Heat 67. Shows a video of you and O'Hara. Unfortunately, Sky have pulled it. They've pulled the video. So I don't know if anybody I don't know if anybody's watched it live. The chances are I'll never be invited back on. But anyway, go and see if you can get it on catch up. Thanks everybody for getting involved.
Oh, surely not.
It's pulled off the socials, It's gone. And the shrug of a shoulder, is it gone?
What, just because you questioned him on saying about Stockport County winning the league?
Yeah, I did say he'd made a fool of himself. I don't think that was too bad. It wasn't really studs up. Anyway, there you go. It might resurface somewhere. But the bottom line is this, JP. I'm not compromised. Right, and this is the thing when it comes to when you're hearing people on the telly giving their opinions, and they're going on about something like Desmond being a genius and Mr. Desmond this and that. You're compromised. Your opinion's got to be your opinion, and I will always give you my opinion. You know, I don't have any paymasters telling me what I can and can't say.
I was on the radio last week talking to Gordon Smart on 5 Live, and if he did come out, I wouldn't, because I know he's a Hibs fan and everything else, but like if he'd have come out with anything daft, I would have certainly challenged that. I wouldn't have felt like, I'm just going to dance around this, or not say how I feel. I mean, he asked me about the whole Celtic supporters disgruntlement with this season and everything else, and I told him, I said, look, it's because we were at a whisker away from knocking out Bayern Munich last season, and we've gone to the point of not recruiting pretty much at all, and then going into a Champions League qualifier with 3 players who were in discussions to leave the club.
Yeah.
How on earth do you expect those players to give 100% in those games if one of them thinks this is going to be the last time he kicks a ball for this club? Your head's going to be all over the place. Maeda with that chance. Like, he's not the clinical assassin Maeda in that game that he should have been, because he's thinking, oh God, this is all on me. Like I'm not going to be here. Small fraction of doubt in your mind changes how you kick that ball, changes how you head a ball, everything.
It does, and I listen to footballers talking about that, where other things are going on in their lives, JP, and they're playing games of football, and they're labouring whatever this outside issue is, this stress or this worry, and it affects their game. You're not telling me Maeda wasn't 100% in the game that night. So you're 100% right. But in terms of what we do is we give our opinions. Nobody's giving an agenda. I'll give you my opinion, and JP might disagree. And likewise, we haven't yet even had a chance to talk about music, but it's 1 hour and 15 minutes in. So thank you, every single one of you, for getting involved. If you do find that video, send it across, because it's probably been put into the vault of no return. Thanks, everybody, for getting involved. Thank you to JP Mason for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.